Hey guys, Ryan Dossey, and I just audited the CRMs of 10 different real estate investors, and I found 19 common mistakes. You don't want to miss these. Let's dive right in. Before we get into today's video, be sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content. That helps us get these videos out in front of other real estate investors just like you. As a real estate investor, it's a lot of fun to talk about the deals we're doing, show the before and afters. Even the marketing side can be really cool, right? Just got new mail in, dropping it, hey, look at me logged into my dialer, running these appointments. That's all fun. It's all pretty sexy. Where I see real estate investors really mess up, though, is in their lead management, like how they're actually working their leads inside their CRM. This is the part that's not sexy. It's not fun. This is really where it's like the work of real estate investing, particularly if you're finding off-market deals. So there's 10 guys that I'm working with that I logged in, went through their CRMs, obviously with their permission, and I found 19 things they're doing wrong that are costing them a lot of money. Now, my goal with this video is that you watch it and learn from their mistakes before you start making these yourself. Now, you might watch this video and be like, oh, I'm better than that. I wouldn't do that either. But trust me, it's one thing to sit on this side of the table and be like, oh, I would do a better job. It's different when all of that work that needs to be done is yours. The first mistake I found them doing is telling sellers that they're on a mailing list. Oftentimes when somebody gets a piece of mail or responds to a cold call, SMS, whatever, how you're getting in front of people, they say, hey, how'd you find my info? Or why my house? You don't want to be like, well, you're on a mailing list that I bought through PropStream and I sent the campaign to Ballpoint and you spoke with the call center call porter that I hired. Like, they don't need to know all that. Realistically, your answer to this question should be, your house matches what I'm looking to buy. Now, when you use this statement, you want to be a little bit careful, because if you say 3-bedroom, 2 baths, well, what if they finished out the basement and it actually doesn't match? So we typically use the things that are not changing. So I'm looking for properties in this particular school district that are built in the 90s, that are at least, 2,000 square feet, whatever it is, right? I'm marketing to you because I want to buy your specific house because it meets my needs, is way better than like, oh yeah, you're one of 5,000 people on a list I pulled and I don't really care if you sell me your house or not. Pro tip on this, if you're using Ballpoint, it's designed to look extremely personalized. So if you tell somebody they're just on a mailing list, like, you've kind of blown the effectiveness of your own marketing. The second mistake I saw for guys using Resimply is that they weren't marking take me off the lists or don't contact me again type of calls as dead leads, meaning they're just cluttering up the CRM. We'll throw up a quick screen share real quick on how to remove these, but it's real simple. In the top left where you've got the status of the lead, we're going to click on that, move it to dead, and then fill out the survey of why we're doing so. A quick note on deciding to mark something as a dead lead, be to make sure that you're not using that button too easily or too early. Have a lot of people that tell me, oh, I'm not going to sell my house for that little, that then end up selling their house for that little because we're following up with them. The only time we mark a lead as dead is if they tell us not to contact them again, or if it's a solicitation, a spam call, something that doesn't even pertain to real estate. The third mistake we see is not actually utilizing the CRM that they're paying for. I use Resimply. It's what we recommend and endorse. But it's one of those, it's only going to be as good as the data you put into it. If you have a CRM and you're not taking notes on your calls, you're not making your phone calls through it where you can listen to the appointments, you're not tracking your comps or how you came up with your offers or what your offer was, or even if they accepted it or not. Looking at some of these CRMs, it literally looked like the lead came in and we couldn't tell if they touched it. Now, if you've only got 5 people you're talking to, it's relatively easy to, use a notepad or an Excel sheet and track where you're at with each one. Try doing that though if you have 100 or 200 leads that you're working. The fourth mistake I saw these guys making was taking sellers' timelines as gospel. So if somebody says, oh, I'm not going to be ready to sell for 2 months, you don't want to set a follow-up for 2 months. You want to set one for 3, 4, maybe 5 weeks. Reason being, a lot can change in 2 months or 6 months. And I can't tell you guys early on how many times I'd say, okay, I'm going to call them in 6 months like they asked. I call them and they're like, oh, I sold that place 3 months ago. And I'm like, what do you mean? You told me, wait 6 months. Why did you sell it sooner? Well, somebody just did a better job and was more persistent than I was. On that note, if somebody says, for instance, right now, hey, let's wait till after the holidays, give me a call then. You still want to have a conversation, build rapport, get to know them, and set the date of that next phone call, not just be like, yeah, okay, I'll call you then, right? Reason being, they're not going to remember that they spoke to you after the holidays. They're going to be extremely busy. They're going to roll into the new year with their resolutions, and they're going to forget that you even spoke, versus taking the time to have a 10, 15-minute long conversation, figuring out what they're looking to do, what their goals are. Maybe you even hit them up through the holidays and say, hey, Merry Christmas. Hey, Happy New Year. Hey, when's a good time to chat this week? Versus just like, okay, cool, I'll call you back then. That's weak. The fifth thing I noticed was with regards to these investors making offers, and that's they weren't tracking how the offer went in the CRM at all. We don't know if the seller liked the offer. We don't know if they started asking buying questions, or if there was a spouse they needed to talk to, or if they had a counter. It's really, really hard to follow up with somebody you're negotiating with if you don't remember where you left off. I've never actually shared this before, but we used to make this mistake. And one of our acquisitions guys actually negotiated a $10,000 better deal than what he sent the contract for because he didn't note it. And we didn't catch it until after we bought the property, sold the property. It's a $10,000 mistake because somebody didn't put in seller accepted at blank. They just went off of their memory of, yeah, this was what we'd offered. They liked the number. This is what they came in at, right? So you want to make sure you're noting that kind of stuff so you don't make dumb, costly mistakes like that. The sixth one, and I'm realizing quickly that I'm going to run out of fingers before I get to the end of these, has to do with when somebody says that your offer is too low. Very, very often when we're meeting with somebody, they don't necessarily have a number in mind, or if they do, they won't tell us. Very often it's like they Googled it and it's what Zillow told them it was worth. The news has shown us that didn't work well. But you make somebody an offer and they say, hey, that's too low. A lot of investors, if that's their max, they're just like, oh, okay, well, sorry, right? And they're just done with it. What we always do is call them a week, 10 days, 2 weeks later and say, hey, have you found anybody willing to pay your exorbitant, asking price that no one's ever going to pay? Well, no, I haven't. Oh, great. Let's talk about my offer a little bit more. What other questions did you have on it? You'd be surprised how many deals that'll land you. The seventh thing we noticed that these guys were doing was uploading like individual pictures into the CRM, where it's just like JPEG after JPEG after JPEG. How we always do it is a Google Photos album. That way it's really, really easy to just like click on it. It opens everything up. We're not cluttering the CRM with a whole bunch of data. We're not slowing it down with a whole bunch of massive pictures. And it makes it really, really easy to share those pictures if we want bids from our contractors or if we're going to wholesale the property. The eighth thing I caught them doing was just deleting leads. Not marking it as dead, just being like, oh yeah, that I made an offer. They thought it was too low, so I just deleted it. Guys, you never want to delete data. That's kind of like business data management 101. It's kind of like deleting like the video files we shoot here. We always keep them in case we want to re-edit or tweak something later. This is no different. If you just delete somebody out of your CRM, how are you going to track that they were a take me off the list, right? How are you going to track that it's somebody you made an offer to? If your market keeps going up, like ninja thing to do, call back everybody you've made offers to, say, hey, the market's gone up, I can pay more, let me come back out. You can't do that if you just hit the old delete button. The ninth thing we saw these guys and gals doing was somebody calls in and says, I've sold that property. And they just say, oh, okay, sorry about that, have a nice day. You always, always, always want to ask, do you have any other properties that you want to sell? I have more of these than I can count, where somebody called in as a take me off the list, or a, hey, I no longer own that house, that I've said, totally awesome. Do you have anything else similar you're looking to sell? That then they've said, oh yeah, actually I do. They're not normally going to volunteer that info if you don't ask, because they're assuming you sent them this nice piece of mail or cold called or whatever. on one particular asset that's what you were interested in. So they might not mention, well, I also own a hotel or a mobile home park or another house around the corner. So always, always, always make sure that you at least ask. You've either spent a decent bit of money or a decent bit of time to get them on the phone. Might as well go that extra mile. This next one is the reason, I'll be honest, that I actually decided to put this out. I genuinely got like pretty frustrated, a little upset when I was going through these, because anybody I work with, I genuinely want to see you succeed. I have a pretty solid reputation in this niche because we get people results. However, like, I can't do everything for the people I work with. I'm not picking what they're marketing to. I'm not making their offers. I'm not doing their negotiations. I'm not running their appointments. I'm not analyzing their deals, estimating repair costs. There's all of these parts of this process that lean on you as the investor to execute, right? It's kind of like you're playing baseball. Somebody can tee it up for you, but if you just don't swing, you're never going to hit the freaking ball, right? There was a lead that I saw when I was going through doing these audits that was like, a lady called in, her husband passed away. She wanted to downsize because she didn't want to be in the house anymore. She owed less than half of what it was worth, said she wasn't interested in making a profit, just didn't want to have to go back into the property. And I could see no notes, no phone calls, no appointments, no follow-ups from the investor. I don't know if they just missed it, if they just worked the lead and didn't update anything, or if they were like, literally, they just didn't work the lead. It's kind of counterintuitive, like sitting on your end of this. If you haven't done marketing, you're like, if I spent the money, I'm going to do the work. But, it's kind of like buying a gym membership and not showing up and putting in the reps. Millions of people do it. There's investors all the time that spend money on marketing and then decide not to put in the actual work of working their leads. So for my sake, and for your sake, particularly if you're using any of my companies, like, don't waste my time and your money if you're not willing to see it through. This next one was extremely common in all 10 CRMs I audited, and that's seriously underestimating the amount of work required to convert somebody who's potentially interested in selling to an appointment and then over to a deal. A lot of these guys would maybe try to call the lead once or twice after it called in and spoke with call porter. And if they couldn't get it back on the phone, they just weren't doing anything with it, like sitting there for 4, 5, 6 weeks with no touches. Very, very often, we're doing 5, 10, 15, 25, 30 phone calls and text messages to get somebody back on the phone to get an appointment in order to get that deal. I've shared tons of these stories on YouTube where I'm like, hey, we touched this lead 110 times to make $50,000. You guys all want the $50,000, but a lot of you all, to be blunt, are just too lazy to put in the 100 touches to get that thing done. So don't underestimate the amount of work. The other thing that I kind of like to explain, like the analogy I give, typically costs about $100 to get a phone call in the real estate niche. Imagine if at the beginning of the month, we knew you were going to get 30 calls, so I handed you $3,000. For every one you didn't get on the phone, if I took $100 physically from you, you'd probably work your leads a lot harder, right? The next thing I saw is something that you guys are going to run into pretty often if you do marketing of any kind at any size or scale. You're going to have people call you that their property's already listed with a realtor, or they might even have their realtor call you. Now, one thing I would like to point out, if somebody lists with a realtor and then calls you, it means they don't feel like the realtor is getting it done, right? Why else would they be calling you? So what we always tell them is, hey, look, typically we don't deal with listed properties unless you're willing to sell for substantially less than what you're currently listed for. If you're willing to sell for less than what you're listed for, I can absolutely look at it. And then we ask them, are they under contract with the realtor or not? Quite often, they're actually not under contract, or it's a family friend that threw it up for them and they can pull it down real quick. We just tell them, like, if they can pull it down, we'll deal with them directly. If it is on the market and they are under contract, we do have to go through their realtor. What you don't want to do with listed properties is, oh, sorry, can't help you. I've bought a lot of properties that were listed where they decided to sell for substantially less. And if you keep an eye on your own market, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You'll see something listed for here, go off the market, and a month later sell for down here. You could get that deal if you work your leads. This next one is a little bit like Simply specific, but most CRMs have the functionality of setting like tasks or reminders. So my rule with my own staff is they either have to have a task assigned to the lead or like an SMS drip sequence running. One of those two things. There should never be a lead sitting in the CRM that has absolutely nothing going on with it. If it does, to take me off the list or it's a solicitation, it should be marked dead. It shouldn't just be sitting there collecting dust. The reason for this rule of either having a task or a drip sequence running, it is extremely easy to forget to call people, forget where you're at with a lead, and like miss an appointment or a date. I don't know about you guys, but basically if it's not on my calendar, I don't show up to it. So in your business, if you have 4 people you're talking to, okay, cool. Might not forget you've got to call Mary on Tuesday. Currently in my own CRM, I have over 350 active leads, and we've had thousands go through our CRM. There's absolutely no way that my staff are going to remember that they've got to call lead number 233 next Tuesday at 4 p.m. if they don't have something reminding them to do so. One thing I will recommend if you're behind is we start on the oldest, lowest priority leads and work our way over. So we're going to start with the people that we've never got on the phone, work our way from oldest to newest. Then we're going to go with the people we got on the phone but not to an appointment, oldest to newest. Then we're going to go with the people we met with the furthest back, oldest to newest, and then same thing with the offers we've made, oldest offers to most recent offers. It's kind of a really clear way to understand like what should I be doing today. It's also helpful if you're behind and you're kind of looking at this like mountain of how do I get caught back up. This next one, I'm kind of like begging you guys on, and that is make sure you're not going a month plus between interactions. The likelihood of a seller remembering you, remembering a conversation you had, remembering they told you to call them is extremely low. A lot can change in 30 days for a person. They could lose their job, right? They could find out they're getting divorced. I can't tell you guys the amount of times I've got somebody who's on like a niche list where I know they have stuff going on that they might not know it yet. For instance, we pull our divorce records straight from county. When I'm marketing to people, I'm not saying things like, sorry about your divorce, because oftentimes they haven't even been served with papers yet. So that guy might call me and say, hey, yeah, we're trying to decide what we're going to do with it, but we're in no rush to sell. But he doesn't know that he's got paperwork coming, right? So you never know what can change for somebody in 30 days. Make sure that you're staying top of mind without being annoying. This next tip is just kind of like best practice if you're using an answering service. And that's you want to mention the employee that they spoke with and a couple details about the conversation to connect the conversation back to you. So Call Porter, for instance, takes all my calls and takes calls from most of the people I work with. When we have a rep that just builds incredible rapport with one of our leads, we're calling them back and we're saying, hey, Jasmine kind of brought me up to speed, mentioned XYZ, had incredible things to say about you. I'm here now to talk about actually buying the property. I'm going to be coming out to look at it, whatever the next step is, right? But we're looping back in this great conversation they had with, hey, this is somebody on our team. They've now kind of passed the ball over to me. They had great things to say about you. Here's where we go from here. Instead of them just getting a random call out of the blue, trying to remember what company it was that they spoke with, they're much more likely to remember that good conversation they had with somebody than they are to remember that great conversation they had was with somebody from company X, right? Especially if you're one of those investors that has like a goofy business name or no business name that's like hard to remember. You want to kind of draw that mental connection back. The way you can pick up with the rapport and carry on the torch, instead of it just feeling almost like a cold call, even though it's not. A lot of investors, when they get calls from sellers, they try to do this like, it's prejudging their leads. They try to figure out like, is this gonna be worth my time? My rule of thumb, you don't get to be picky until you have more deals and more money than you know what to do with, but most investors don't act that way. Most sellers call in asking too much money and don't appear to be motivated. Who's going to call a stranger and be like, I'm desperate to sell my house because my wife is leaving. Please give me as much money as possible, right? They're going to pretend like not much is going on. But keep in mind, even if you have a 1 or 2% response rate, that means 98% of people got your piece of marketing and chose not to call you. The 2% that did for a reason. So particularly, anybody that calls in asking less than like Zillow estimate, asking less than what we know it's worth, is something you should be very excited about. It seems like most of them just Google it and give a Zestimate as what they're asking. So anytime it's below that, especially substantially, you should be really excited, not like, no, they're only asking 10% less, so I don't know that this one's worth my time. On that note, you're likely to see a lot of really, really bad advice from influencers on social media that don't actually do very many deals. I get a kick out of some of the stuff I see from people that like, I know they're not actually doing that much and they're speaking as if their words are gospel. Even mine. You should take everything I say with a serious grain of salt. What works for me and what works for my clients might not apply to your situation, right? Even still, this like, oh, get a ballpark out of them before you go waste your time. Bro, if you're broke, it's going to take you longer to get a deal if you act like that than if you treat everybody the same and you have the same process and you work your leads with the same level of ferocity, not just like, oh, I'll only go meet with somebody if they're asking 30% less than comps. Like, good luck, that's a needle in a haystack. This next one can't be understated enough, and that is speed to lead is critical. If a call comes in, if you're not using an answering service, you'd better get that person back on the phone like immediately. Harvard Business Review did a study on this, but it's like if you let a lead wait even 5 minutes, there's something like 1,000% decrease in the likelihood that you're going to be able to convert that lead into a deal. Same thing goes even if you are using an answering service. They call in, they get somebody, they have some questions, they're not ready to book an appointment, whatever. If a lead comes in on Thursday, you should call it back on Thursday. Friday morning at the absolute latest. What I was seeing in a lot of these CRMs is somebody calls in Monday and it's like, oh, I might get to that Thursday when I feel like it. The reason I started Call Porter, I had a seller call me on a Friday night, so it's before Call Porter existed, left me a voicemail. Here's my address, the condition. My brother died. He left me the house. I want like 20 grand for it. I listened to the voicemail and I was like, wow, 20 grand is a steal on that place. I didn't call him back until Monday. I was on the weekend, Saturday, I don't work Sundays, that's the Lord's Day, right? Get to the guy on Monday. Hey, it's Ryan, I got your voicemail. He goes, oh, Ryan, yeah, somebody else called me on Saturday. They took the initiative actually to pick up the phone. They came out, made me an offer. I actually sold it to him for 10. Guys, this was at a position in my career where like I needed a win, right? If you haven't been there, you'll get there. And this would have been like a $20,000, $30,000 deal that I botched because I was too slow in getting to my leads. Learn from my mistake. Don't make the mistakes these guys are making. So learn from my mistake or learn from theirs. The last one I've got for you here has to do with out-of-state owners. You'll occasionally get a phone call from somebody who owns a property. They don't live in the market and they're only going to be in town for like 3 hours one afternoon or something like that. You want to clear your schedule to get to that appointment. One of the things I saw a couple times in these guys' CRMs was those situations, and that particular day or time didn't work for that investor. So they were like, let me know next time you're in town. Out-of-state investors tend to sell at a discount, probably more than just about anybody else. So if they're coming to town to look at a property that they don't live in, there's probably stuff going wrong with it. So they're there looking at a problem that they don't want to have. If you can show up, it's very, very likely that you will get that deal. If you can't, it's very likely that they're going to find somebody else who can. In closing on this one, make sure you're making offers on everything, you're pushing everything to appointments, and you're working every lead, even if they call in sounding like an unmotivated, angry tire kicker. You never know who's going to pan out. I've got a deal that I'm actually listing tonight that called us, was super blunt, kind of rude, hey, I got your card. What do you want? Kind of a person. This is what we do. This is how it works. We'd love to come out and make you an offer. She was 45, 50 minutes without traffic away from our office in Indianapolis. We drove down to see her, looked at the property, called her to make an offer, and it was a very curt, blunt conversation of like, yeah, okay, yeah, let me think about that. Click. Ouch, right? Texted in a couple hours later and said, you've got a deal, write it up, here's the address. Here's my email address. We bought the property for $140,000. We put $12,000 into it. My purchase and rehab was funded with somebody just like you, a private lender. We pay 8 to 9% interest typically for that kind of a setup. We're listing the place for $235,000. If I'd acted how I see a lot of investors act, I would have not gotten that deal because it wouldn't have been worth my time. She was unmotivated. She was rude. But instead, I'm going to net 60 to 70 grand because I followed my processes, and I hope that you'll learn to do the same. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to ask one favor from you. You've made it this far. Hopefully it was helpful for you. If it was, share it with one person that you think it could benefit. Literally click the share button, text it to them. We're trying to grow this channel. We put a lot of effort into this content and into our production quality, and I appreciate you honoring that if it's helping you. If you didn't find it helpful, they removed the dislike button, I think, so just comment like use me as the dislike button and let people smash it for you, right? Get your notifications. But if you did, all we ask is that you share it. Again, my name was Ryan Dossey. Hopefully this helps you out in your real estate investment career. I'll talk to you next time.